Here we are.
Howdy. How goes it, buddy?
How goes it? What's up?
Another day,
We have
another dollar.
we have
Good old,
six in the house.
hey,
Six
y'all.
people.
Six in the
Hey,
house.
Jen, Brandy, how's it going?
Welcome, everybody. I'm just getting all set up here. Guys, we've been having a little bit of technical difficulty. Last week, I had a week from hell with my Facebook. I could not get onto Facebook. So, rub it in, Richard. But I couldn't get into Facebook. I tried as I may. I couldn't let
Hey,
Messenger work.
Sammy,
It would not do what it was supposed to do.
Stephanie, Tara,
Ended up getting a factory reset. Things seemed to subside a bit.
Nicole, Eva.
Nonetheless, I guess now we're having more issues with Facebook again. Now, it's not necessarily
Brenda,
my end
Mort,
this time, but it's
Sheila,
Messenger. So
Valerie.
we appreciate y'all being here. But if you can't see us here, please let us know, okay? Look at that. So tell us all about the wicked mug you got while I get all set up here.
The Wicked Mug. A great family. Um, the husband's a sheriff's deputy, and the wife is a new mother, and they're just, they're trying to do what they can for their family. And she makes these
Absolutely.
incredible items.
Mm-hmm.
How
How cool
about
is that?
ya?
I love it.
From both
Love it.
sides. How about ya? 15.3 ounces, $15, custom made this way.
How
Custom
cool is
made.
that, guys? So
Real
where
cool.
can our wonderful fans, wonderful viewers, where can they pick something like this up if they want one?
Honestly, I put up a link on my Facebook page not too long ago, a few days ago, to her Facebook page, so you can reach out to her. It's just it's a family business, but she does an incredible job. I actually got tumblers, big, tall tumblers, for the actual team. This is Haunted Travelers on them with their logo and stuff. Really cool, really cool novelty items, and she really takes great care in how she does it. She doesn't just fling it together and hope it sticks. So I'm like, I'm not going to put our show name on anybody that I wouldn't think is going to do the right job. So, and yours is going to happen. I'm getting yours together.
Oh, I'm excited. I can't wait because you know how I love my mugs, baby. I collect mugs, so I'm all about that.
What I find very sad, though, is that the shipping to Canada. What the? Jesus.
Your oldest. Your firstborn.
I never thought anything in my life.
No, it's true. It's true.
But yeah, I'm very happy with the mug that she made. And she's got a Facebook page. Lori, what's the name of the Facebook page? Mama's Mini Boutique.
Okay.
On Facebook.
Right on.
That was your first appearance on the show. Welcome, Lori. She's the associate producer here. She's she's the PA for the show.
Right on. Welcome, everybody. So, beginning of the show, for those of you who are joining us for the first time, we simulcast, and that means that we are on different networks at the same time, and therefore I may not be able to see all your comments. Richard will, he's got the master, but I've got a couple computer screens set up here below me, trying to keep up with people's comments. So, if you see me looking down, I'm not doing anything else but looking at what you guys are talking about to try to keep up. I'm not falling asleep. We're trying to fall asleep. Something that was brought up last episode, where we had a little bit of, I'm not going to call them issues with comments, but we had some people frustrated. Okay, basically, what's going on is we don't want people to be offended if we can't get to your comments.
Right.
Okay. We want you guys to be comfortable and feel that you can't be here. However,
welcome to the show.
We try to keep the comments to the discussion that we're having. Paranormal is such a convoluted subject, and there's so much going on. It's really hard for us to keep that going. So, please excuse us if you really want to get your questions answered. Don't hesitate to private message us. We're not out to ignore you. We just can't keep up. Okay, guys?
Yeah, I mean, it's last week was a very busy show for us. Mm-hmm. It was actually one of the most popular shows we've done in a while. and we had well over 300 comments. And yeah, I mean, I'm quick on the draw, but
Right.
trying to get them all up and try to get them to where we can read them for you. I have to be a little bit better about how we decipher what we're going to pull up because it really needs to be relevant, guys. We do answer a lot of aside questions, but it does need to be relevant for me to put it up on the screen because we want to get the content covered that we're bringing up for the evening, like tonight's content. I know there's going to be a lot of feedback about it. What's up, Howard? Hey, Joanne. Patty, how's it going?
Guys.
And I know there's going to be a lot of feedback about it because it's a really great topic. I actually did an entire panel on this particular subject. So to me, it kind of is befitting to bring it up. We've kind of skirted around the time, at times about this subject, talking about hauntings, talking about different things, but we just never really got deep into what ifs, and I think the what ifs are really important.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. So, we talk about haunting. Well, almost every episode, I'm going to say every episode, we talk about scenarios of hauntings, but we really don't get into the in-depth discussion of, is a location haunted, is a thing haunted, or is a person haunted?
Yeah.
I'm sure, for those of you out there, you've heard of somebody at least that that goes, I don't get it. Everywhere I go, everywhere I move, there's activity. I can't go anywhere. Doesn't matter. It comes with me. That's when you're haunted. And I would like to think that that's a little bit different than an attachment. Maybe it's a little bit of semantics, but to me, an attachment operates a little differently. It's more of a parasitic mind form, but this is almost like a direct link to you. Okay, so we're going to be getting into that tonight. I'd like to know how many of those of you out there have actually felt that they, in fact, were haunted. Something that you felt that was following you, but it was not an attachment stealing your energy. It was just kind of popping up everywhere you were.
Yeah, guys. I mean, it's been the complaint that I've had on several residential cases where we've had people that are like, I can't go anywhere without something happening. Because one of the first questions you ask when you do residential and they talk about having issues at the home, one of my first questions simply is, did you have this at the previous location you lived?
Right.
Okay. And then you did. Oh, okay. Well, you did. How about the place before that? Same type of activity? Okay. Now we get to be able to drill down to it might be you. In my conversation points with people that I've done investigations and cleansings for, you have to look at all the factors that kind of bring all this to light one way or the other. It may not be the person you're talking to at that particular time. It might be somebody else in the house. I mean, and no offense to the ladies, but females in their adolescence are like, whoa, when it comes to being able to draw in paranormal energy. You know what I mean? So it's just kind of one of those things where you have to sit back and you have to wonder when you're going through that time in your life as a female, your hormones are going like this, and that isn't attracted for the paranormal activity. I mean, it's something you have to take into consideration. Moves in the environment. I mean, Tim Mosley, just your first time viewer, came in and said that. He said there's an interesting theory involving moods in your environment. Like you're mad and you walk into a room and a book might fall over. Right, because you're giving energy. You're passing out energy. And that has a lot to do with it. I've dealt with a lot of cases personally where the house was really active because of the person in it, and that wasn't going to change until they changed the essence of who they were. Because sometimes you can't get rid of that crap. It's a lot harder to get rid of certain things like poltergeist activity. PK manifestations are very tough to get rid of, okay? Because that person that developed that PK manifestation, that person has to change, again, essentially who they are to be able to change the energy to kill that PK manifestation. It's not going to go poof in the middle of the night and go away. It's going to hang around. It thrives on the energy. It thrives on your energy. And that goes to a lot of people because a lot of people don't understand that. For example, poltergeist activity is not anything other than what the living have created. It is an item in the paranormal world that the living people create. As crazy as it may sound, that's really
Exactly.
what it comes down to.
Yeah, and there's situations where spirits can move things, but we're talking about, in poltergeist activity, we're talking about things that don't make sense. We're talking about all of a sudden a drawer opens up and a set of scissors gets thrown on the floor. We're talking about cupboard doors all of a sudden opening. Okay, those are things that are created again by that energy. And so, as Richard has stipulated, sometimes it's you that has to make that change in order for the shifts to happen. I had a call today actually from somebody in Northern Ontario, and she was having issues in her child's room, and the activity didn't start until she cleansed. I said, well, may I ask you, why did you feel you needed to cleanse? And she said, well, I just wanted to freshen up, make sure that there was nothing in the child's room, and go from there. And it was after that things were flying off the wall. And so I said, well, sometimes that creates a disturbance. Sometimes when you haven't cleansed fully, when you haven't cleansed properly, or you haven't, you haven't given a good go, so in other words, done it a couple times, you actually upset the apple cart. And what happens is you're not necessarily pissing it off, pardon the pun, but you're just kind of, it's letting you know that it's around. So sometimes you got to continue, or you have to have that conversation to settle it down. Yeah, very rarely does that happen, but perfect case scenario.
Yeah, I mean, it's just really, guys. I did a 90-minute panel on this one time, and it really maybe put a dent in the amount of material that needed to be covered. And this 90-minute show is still not going to make as big a dent as we would like to make in it, because there's so much that's involved. There's so many different types of hauntings. There's so many different levels, layers of haunting. For example, in the haunting that I deal with all the time at the Wright Hotel, there are two family members that can't even see each other because they're on two different planes. You dig that? These is a mother and a daughter that are in the same building and don't know the other one's there because they're on two different planes, two different levels. Now, that just gives you an example. Now, you just don't have one layer of paranormal. You've got a multiple level of layers of paranormal. And oh, by the way, you might have 13, 14, 20 people in the place. Now look at the math on that. It's crazy.
Yeah, and that's constituted as different hauntings. That is different hauntings. Yeah. That is not you can use kind of a generalism and say my house is haunted, but you're literally dealing with different hauntings. They're not interactive in the same plane, and that becomes a lot more complicated in itself too.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. Sorry, I'm going through the comments. Hey, Jeremy, how's it going?
No, amazing.
Sherry, good to see you. Okay, so Sherry has an example. She said, I had a rolling pin roll off the kitchen island, caught it in camera, saw our clothes hamper loud and raise and fall back in. Yeah, I mean, those are just some examples of it. And again, it's how many different levels, layers, and effects are there for the paranormal that would make a haunting up? There are some people that just get nothing for themselves other than they have goosebumps. They don't really have a real way to discern what they're dealing with. And then you got other people who are sensitive to it, and God bless them, because now they're like, I can't sleep at night. I can't do this. I can't do that. I can't be alone in the basement. I can't, it becomes terrorizing. And there are times that you could go, and frankly, it's the truth. You can go to a location to do a ghost tour, or example, come home with some baggage. You never know. I've seen it happen time and time again. I've had to cleanse people that went to locations where they thought it was super cool. Yeah, that's great. And you came home with a friend. So they wonder why all the crap's going on in their home. But, there's reasons for that. You got to take care of yourself. But there's different levels, different types of hauntings. Katie, why don't you kind of go over some of the basic levels for them?
Okay, so basic levels of hauntings is your basic intelligent haunt, which means that it's interactive with you. It's conscious that you're there. It may not be conscious of other spirits, like Richard had said earlier. There's different variant levels, and then there's scenarios in that intelligent haunt where you're dealing with entities that kind of meld together. They communicate together, and sometimes they're afraid of each other. I've had certain investigations where we'll be communicating with the spirit, and all of a sudden it'll go silent, and we'll ask the question, and they'll say, through the voice box or what have you, through EVP, shh, he's coming, and then everybody else scatters. All of the spirits scatter. So, there's very different forms. Again, we get into poltergeist, we get into, that energy. Would I consider that a haunting? Probably not. I would lend to think that it's more like your energy, but there are scenarios where spirits are able to do that. They're able to move things. They're able to get your attention. Then we move into residual haunt. So residual haunt is like the good old stone tape theory. And basically what it stipulates is that there's a replay in time. It's a time loop. And when you get into this time loop, they don't know that you're there, and you're witnessing them, and they're doing things over and over and over again. So that doesn't necessarily mean that, 24 hours a day, they're falling, again and again and again. Although in some cases it can happen, but let's think of the Battle of Gettysburg. Let's go there for a minute. There's many times that people have witnessed and heard the cannon fire, and it's going over and over again. Some nights that you hear it more than others. Sometimes it's cyclical within the weeks or months or days. It's not like it has to happen every single day. And then you have what I like to call people who are haunted, and people who are haunted, it's not what you think. So there's the parasitic version of the haunting where you get an attachment, which means you go to a location or you purchase something, whether it be used or new. You go to a location to purchase something, it clamps onto you and it feeds off of your energy. That is parasitic in nature. We dial it back a little bit further, and then there are spirits who decide to follow you home, and we call those hitchhikers. So the spirits that tend to follow you home are not necessarily trying to feed off of your energy, but everywhere you look, they're popping up, and they're making their presence known. What happens in a scenario like that is basically what they do, if they've created a tetherment or a cord, okay, a portal, a pathway from you to them. So not only do they choose to stay with you, but they may go back to their own haunting, and they have created basically a highway to you. So if they choose to pop in, they will come to you. This is not the same as a spiritual journey. Okay, so we're going to get into it a little bit deeper. There's ghosts and spirits, and a lot of people kind of don't define those, but I make sure whenever I'm doing an investigation or working, on a cleansing or even doing psychic work, that I'm really determining what the difference is. When you are dealing with something like that, you really got to take into consideration, is it out to get you, or is it out to get information from you? So, it's really important that you kind of keep those divided. What else is there? There's so much. There's, like I said, the poltergeist activity. What else is there, Richard? What am I leaving out?
Now, honestly, I think you covered the great basics of it all. I think, if you want to take every facet of paranormal activity, we'd be here for hours. Again, what we happen to know about paranormal activity, quite frankly, could fit in a thimble. I mean, truly, it can. We're not there. There is no expert in the paranormal. There isn't. I don't care who you are. There is no expert. You can be very well versed. You can be experienced, but you're never going to be an expert. An expert means you know more than just about anybody out there. And there's no way in the world anybody can say that.
We're all learning. We're all learning. I'm learning every day. Every day. That's a test every day.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, if you're in the paranormal and you don't learn something every time you go out, you're not open enough to learning. That's really what it comes down to. That's the bottom line. You're not open enough to learning. Dealing with a lot of residential investigations, hauntings, as it were. You dealt with them a lot too, Katie. You have to really, as an investigator coming in, you want to help the family. This is something they're dealing with, something that's really disrupting their lives, something that's really got them on the edge. It's bothering the family, it's bothering the mother, the father, the kids, whatever. When it comes down to a case with kids, I'm on the kids thing. The minute I hear kids, man, I'm there. The first pure opportunity I can get to be out there, I'm out there.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing of it is the majority of the problem, frankly, with the hauntings is the fear of the unknown. You could have a couple of relatives in the house, but you don't know who they are, so
Right.
you're freaking out. So I mean that type of a haunting could just be them trying to communicate to you. So, but here's the challenge though, is that we've got so many, and I hate saying it because it sounds derogatory.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't like being derogatory.
You're
But let's
down,
talk about it. Let's talk about it anyway.
right?
Okay,
On
so
the journey.
here's the thing. If you feel you have something going on in your home, I would tell you to find a team. And I'm not saying this because I am one, and I'm not saying it because Katie is one as well. But find a team that is operating with a psychic medium. Okay? If you don't have one that you contacted that has one, only deal with ones that might be able to network with one. Okay? Because when it comes down to your home, no matter what the haunting is, going in there and just proving that there's paranormal activity does nothing for you. And frankly, if you have somebody come in your home just to prove that there's paranormal activity, most likely they're going to crank it up. Because now you just created a seance. Now you've just committed a seance. You've opened that door of communication. So guess what? That investigating team can go ahead and go home. You get to stay home with the guests that aren't paying the bills. And things are going to get worse. So reach out to a team. We've talked about this before. My team, nor is Katie's team, charged to do an investigation. Okay? Go with a team that won't do that to you. Go with a team that does have some kind of network, or at least have a network, if not a working medium with them, that can discern the activity for you. Okay? Because just walking in there and saying this is going to take care of it when you don't know is like shooting in the dark. You're not going to hit the target. So, working with a psychic medium is going to give them an opportunity to be able to say, okay, hey, this is going on here. This is what we need to do to cleanse it here. Because overall, it's not a matter of you finding out what kind of haunting you have or who's haunting you, if it's Uncle Jeb or whatever. That's not really the answer. You need resolve. You need resolve. So you need to have a team that's going to bring you the resolve to be able to get you there. Hauntings aren't they're not a joke. No matter what type of haunting it is, even if it's a residual haunting where the same steps are going up and down the hallway every night at 10 o'clock, that's still unnerving. Okay? That's still unnerving. It shouldn't be taken lightly. But you really need to also be sure of who you contact to be able to bring into light what's going on in your home. Don't invite an injustice into your home because it's going to make it worse.
Right.
It really is.
And, I think you brought up a really great point, because not only could you essentially bring something home, or you could make something get worse, but there's been circumstances where we've gone into a location and a specific entity doesn't like one of the investigators, or it targets one of the investigators, or it's targeting a specific person. You have to break it down even further to discover whether this person has an attachment, and so it's becoming possessive over this person, or or the space, it doesn't want you in the space, it doesn't want you around, or is it the fact of the matter that it's frightened of you? Like, there's a lot of things to kind of take into consideration. The bottom line is, it always has a way to kind of get to you when you leave. And so we're not saying to be afraid of these things. We're simply saying take the steps necessary to make sure that you're doing everything proper. Somebody had mentioned in the chat room about, kind of, I can't even think of the word, but kind of demanding it to come out and provoking it. Not always a good idea, guys. It's not something you want to do. Sometimes when you go to a location, you may bring the worst out of that location. So there may be more activity after you leave. And when you've created that imbalance, even if it's a residual energy, you may hear the steps 2 times that night rather than once. You may hear things can change, the energy and the atmosphere can change. So it's really important to stay ahead of those things.
Right. Hey, Tim, how's it going? Guys, the one thing I will tell you, she makes a great point. Katie makes a great point. As far as provoking goes, provocation that behavior will get you the same in return. I can guarantee you that if you go into a location, you try to pull a, oh, I almost said his name. You try to pull I almost said his name. You try to go in there and provoke like you're some big man or, tough woman, you're going to get the same crap that you give out in return. I can guarantee it. If it isn't that one particular investigation, it's going to happen down the road. Don't look at what you watch on television and believe that's the way you got to do it. Trust me, a lot of it's so wrong, it's not even funny. So, take proper steps, operate with caution. Don't go out there provoking, because I'm going to tell you, I did. I'm going to be honest about it. I did years and years and years ago. And then I found that I actually got more evidence gathered by operating with honey than vinegar. So I pay a lot of respect and a lot of homage to the spirits in the building, because I read the research, I looked up the history of the place, I knew who I'm contacting and trying to contact, and I engage them as if they're friends or family. And I have gotten so much more in return by doing that than I would ever have gotten from the jackasses that I reach out to and try to talk smack to. Because that's all you're going to get is smack talk or hurt. Yeah. You got to look at that too. This stuff is going to come at you, and half the time you can't even see it. So be careful, because it sounds tough and it goes well on TV, but not in real life.
When going into a location, say you're not even an investigator and you've recently moved into a home, or activities amped up in your home, one of the first things that I do, I get a phone call, say this happened, or I'm afraid of this, I'm afraid of that, or I don't know what changed. I ask them, did you do renovations at the location? Did you perhaps bring something? Did you buy a used furniture set, or did you buy, did something that you inherited come in? What changes have you made to that location? So that's one way to kind of narrow down when the stuff would have started and what potentially possibly could have created that. But when you're moving into a new home, new house, new apartment, new flat, whatever you want to call it, it's important to kind of, when you're looking at something, say you want to look to rent, I always tell people, go with your gut. No matter what you do in life, you want to go with your gut. If your gut is telling you run. I don't care if it's the best deal in the world. I had a scenario where I'm from, and they were like, we couldn't pass it down. It was like a full house for $500 a month. We couldn't pass it down. Why do you think it was $500 a month? Because nobody could stay past 3 months. Everybody was breaking their lease. So it's really important to kind of get the background information. It's not just about the price. Then once you've looked at the location and all of those things, really, start to think about. I always encourage people to look at the surroundings. Was there any accidents that occurred, devastation, tragic events outside around? It could be a couple kilometers, miles from the house. It does not have to be in that spot. And that's going to give you another indication. People are so excited about usually moving into a new place that they don't think of those things. And it's a few weeks after that the spirits kind of give them their time. That's when the energy starts getting amped up, or even potentially the poltergeist activity has started.
Right.
You really got to pay attention to what you're doing and where you're going, what you have in your house, what you're fixing, what you're changing, because it can be that simplistic.
Well, and that kind of steps into Tara's point. She said, when we moved into our home, we experienced footsteps at night, cat yawning for no reason, and things being moved. I contacted Katie, and it's a young boy. I spoke with him and asked him not to do these things, but accidentally said that he could stay. The activity stopped. Should I have tried to help him move on? Should I still try, and how would I do it? Let me give you my 2 cents, and then Katie can go ahead and step in, since she's actually worked with you on this case in particular. If you don't know exactly what you're doing, don't do it. If the activity is stopped, he's not posing any threat. So, until you actually know exactly how to do what you're asking to do, I wouldn't do it. Just let it go. There's an opportunity there you could even damage the spirit. So you got to really be careful with that. But if the activity is stopped, I'd just let it go. Katie, what do you think? That's a lady you talked to about something.
Agreed.
So
Absolutely agreed. Sometimes it comes down to certain entities just don't want, or spirits, ghosts don't want something shifted. Once they're acknowledged, or once you've changed you put the furniture back to where they think it should be, sometimes it subsides completely. And sometimes it's not even, it could be something that your partner has brought home, or your partner, it could be an issue with that person. The fact of the matter is, always pay attention to your animals. Animals are a wonderful indication.
Oh yeah.
And find out if you feel that the location is haunted, or you've seen physical apparitions, you've seen physically things happening. Remove yourself from that location, even if it's for a couple of days, and just see. I've told many people, you step out of the house and let your husband stay for a few days, and then vice versa. You get somewhere to go. Can you sleep over at a friend's place just for a couple of days to try to narrow it down to see if it's in fact you or the location that's haunted?
Right.
I had a case one time where this entity did not like the woman's boyfriend and did absolutely everything to terrorize that man, to the point where he was growling. The entity ended up scratching my back because he thought for sure that I was going to get rid of him. And once I kind of figured out what was really happening, we actually discovered that this gentleman was not being faithful to this woman, and he was actually out causing a lot of trouble. And so, whose side do you take, the entities or the guys? And they ended up breaking up over it. But the bottom line, this guy was actually protecting this woman. The spirit was protecting her. He wasn't trying to hurt her. So not every scenario is a bad scenario, as TV portrays, but you really got to get to the nitty gritty. And if you don't know what you're doing, as Richard stipulated earlier, find a good psychic medium and paranormal team that can kind of go in and, debunk things and find out what's really happening.
Now, Tamara says, does it have to be an exact location or general area? I got something going on at my work, even here at home, especially since my mom passed.
Okay. So there could be a couple scenarios that have happened. Your emotions create a lot of different energy fields. So sometimes that could be you, believe it or not, that could be you creating that poltergeist activity. And we always go to television when we think of poltergeist activity, of cupboard doors slamming and things being whipped around the room. It sometimes isn't that intense. Sometimes it's a lot milder than that. So you may notice doors open and close slowly, or drawers you won't see the drawer open, but you come in and the drawer has been opened, those types of things. So it could be your energy. If you're emotional when your mother passed and a lot of stuff went down. Or it could be a scenario where you simply brought something home. Okay. Something tragic happened at work or home, and you brought it back and forth. And that's where we talk about, are you haunted or is the location haunted? It's not necessarily parasitic to you. It's not drawing your energy. You have to find out and ask yourself, do you feel tired all the time? Are you drained? Are you feeling sick? Are you feeling, sometimes physical manifestations, anemia, headaches, chest pain, congestion. I'd say typical allergy symptoms can also be paranormal. So, it's really important to kind of narrow that down and find out what's happening. When you leave the location and you go to a friend's house or you go to another place, how do you feel? Do you feel better? Do you notice it clearing up? Because I can tell you, allergies doesn't do that all the time, right? When you have seasonal allergies, unless you're taking meds, it usually likes to harbor. So it's really important to really stop and think what is going on at that location and why.
Now, Nikki brings up something I want to talk about. She says, same when you feel drawn to a specific location, it almost feels like something is missing and a sadness comes over you until you go into the place, like you're homesick or away. Mm-hmm. All right. So there's a couple ways to look at this, and I'm just going to take the safe approach for a minute. I have been drawn to places. I'm drawn to a couple of them. Okay. But you got to wonder why you're drawn. That's the key. You got to be careful about what is drawing you. Going in under the emotional aspect of it for the draw is scary, because that means something is approaching you metaphysically at your emotions to get your attention. And with you being an empath, that is a target. I mean, empaths operate off of the emotional side of things. So, that may be the draw that has found a niche for you to draw you in. Be careful of that. Okay, I'm drawn to the right hotel, for example, because the stuff that's in there I know is benign, and it's like going home to family. I've dealt with several of them in the building. There's no issues there. Everyone there is pretty cool. They like to see us back. They like to see the guests. I'm drawn to that aspect of it. As far as feeling like I need to be a part of the place or it doesn't feel complete, that would bother me a little bit, hon. I'm just saying, you got to think that one through. You're a very smart lady. Think that one through a little bit. Don't let a place do that to you. Always learn that you can separate yourself from a location as well. Because if you don't learn how to control the activity and learn how to separate when you need to, it can become really bad for you. I've seen it go bad several times with
Yeah.
people. So just be careful. I preach
Um,
that a lot. I know I preach that a lot, but just be careful.
yeah. Dawn had said ours got better after our house fire, and we removed some newspapers, and a handgun was found on the wall. Crazy. You know what? That's not the first time that's happened in any of my cases as well. Things have been found, and sometimes sometimes spirits are so, and I'm going to refer to them as ghosts because they're earthbound. They're not coming back to visit. They're so set on getting justice for what happened to them, or to plead their innocence, or to
Mm-hmm.
give you the last kind of piece of the puzzle to find out what happened, that they're going to do anything to make that happen. And if that means attaching to a person or using you as a portal, as a highway to go from one location to the other, they're going to do that. There are
Yeah,
many
absolutely.
centers in Gettysburg, and I'm using Gettysburg as an example because it's so well known. They just want to go home. They
Yeah.
just want to get home. They don't want to fight anymore. There's been many
Yeah.
EVPs that have been come out that they're just tired. They're just tired. So, as an investigator, I think it's our responsibility to let them know there is a way out. I'm not a believer that you can make an entity leave. In my experience, I've been in this it's almost 22 years now. And in that many years, I've never made an entity, want to go home. I've told them that there's ways of doing it. I've explained to them that on a psychic level that we can try and help you transition, but it's pretty ignorant to assume that I can make them cross over.
Right.
But once you kind of open their eyes a little bit, you can have that communication. That's what they're doing. They're
Yeah.
wanting to go home. So I think it's unfair for some of these locations, and I don't mean Gettysburg. I mean, how do you compress that? How do you contain those soldiers? You can't. But there are certain locations that people pride themselves because it's haunted, and they don't want the entities to leave. And I, quite frankly, think it's up to the entities. I think if they want to go home, by all means, let's try and
They
give
can.
them an up.
Yeah. I mean, the ones that I deal with all the time at the locations that I manage, they want to be there. I mean, that's cool. If I at any time thought that they were being held prisoner, so to speak, I would have an issue with it. But they all want to be there. They're all a part of these locations at one time. So for them, it's the familiarity. But I understand what you're saying because there are a lot of places out there that go, "Oh, this is wicked haunted," and oh, and they get upset with you if you talk about crossing somebody over. Oh my God, they lose their minds over that, and I'm like, really? I mean, so we're just kind of keeping them prisoner? Is that what you're saying? I mean, so to speak, you're just doing that kind of stuff, and I mean, it's just something to have to look at, but it happens all the time.
Yeah.
Now, Howard brought up a point I want to talk to him real quick about. He said, I get angry and upset when at home a lot at times, but when I leave and I get calm and frustration free, all right, you need to cleanse your house. That is an immediate step up and do that. Because that's obviously signs that something in your home is affecting you. And, I've had to do it myself. I fully understand it. But it sounds to me like you need to cleanse that home and hastily move through it and get it done.
And you know what?
Yeah.
That's a great point. Now, Howard's a very well-known paranormal investigator. He's been in the field for years too, so he gets that, which is great. However, it doesn't matter how many years you've been in there. Sometimes it's wonderful that you're cognizant of that, because there are times where it takes my family to say to me, or Richard to say to me, dude, something's not right. Like, you off today? Is something going on? And then I'm like, okay, I got an attachment. So sometimes it takes a third party to make you aware of it, because it's the silent deadly type, I call it. In those types of scenarios, that's a great point as far as feeling angry. A haunting doesn't have to be a spirit. A haunting does not have to be a personality in the sense that it was somebody who died. Okay. There are many locations that people have actually manifested through the active intent, through concentration, focus, and emotional trauma, or devastation or anger. Something has developed a personality. So, in Howard, I don't necessarily think this is your scenario, but I'm going to use it as an example. That could be a gentleman comes home from work for 50 years. He absolutely hates his job. By the end of it, he's angry when he gets home. He plunks down at the table and he pours himself a drink, and that's it. And that energy that he has pushed out is building and building and building and building. And like anything else, when you've had something that's been kind of permeating for that many years, a simple smudge isn't going to cut it. You got to get in there with some elbow grease, and you have to really try to work it out. So it may take multiple cleansings. It may take a couple of people coming in to do it. But the bottom line is, it's not necessarily a ghost that's haunting you. It's you. It's you in that moment of that energy. So, that's a good way to indicate what's actually happening. If you're seeing this person, or you're just always feeling angry.
Now, Tim brings up something I've not really delved in too much. Have you heard about the ghost of 9/11 in New York? When you said I just want to go home, it made me think of that. I've not heard of the ghost from 9/11 at all, to be honest. We've got so many comments in here.
So Sherry says the main spirit didn't like me. And a teen caught it calling me B with an itch and the C over and over again through flashlight communication. It had told me, it didn't want me bringing a team in to see who it was to help them. Okay, so profanity. I don't understand for the life of me why they feel they need to have profanity, but they do. I've been called a lot of things in my life. Called me a lot of things. Basically, they're just insulting you. They don't want you in that space. They're trying to dissuade you from doing what you have to do. The question is why? Do they know that you're more powerful than them? Do they know that you have the ability to kind of cast them out if you needed to? Doesn't mean you can cross them over, but you can cast them out of that space. So a lot of times when they're doing these types of things, it's a possessiveness, and it's also a fear on their part, because they don't want to leave where they've been. They're comfortable there. And that's why a lot of times ghosts stay in that location. It goes as far as scratching and marking and name calling. And there's a lot of things that can happen that's not always demonic in nature. It's really just somebody who doesn't want you in their space.
Right. Now we've had a lot of talk with a lot of these people. And you guys, we've known a lot of you in here for a long time, evidently. Sherry said, Richard told me once there was a black man in my mother's home where I now live wanting to connect with me and couldn't figure it out who it was. And then I remembered the man I witnessed drowning in the ship channel. I tried to help him, but I was on one side and he was on the other. And that's who it was. I asked him if he knew that I carried his picture with me, and he answered yes. Wow.
So maybe he just wanted to validate. Maybe he was trying to say thank you, or maybe that burst of energy that came together, that emotional trauma you felt as well as he felt, is what connected you. Okay, that's where the stone tape theory, the connection comes in, is that there's some sort of a melding that happens, or assimilation, and that's where the cord goes from one person to another. It's that simple. And sometimes it can be difficult to cut. Sometimes it's not easy. You have to go through, rituals, and I'm not getting all fortune tellery on you, but there's certain things that you need to do to complete that.
Pull out your crystal ball. Let's go, Katie.
Right. Now, Tracy says, I'm an empath, sensitive, and indigo. I'm a magnet for spirit, but I don't understand why I go to a certain town I need to go, it's bad vibes. Okay, so the good thing about an antenna is that it picks up all sorts of energy. Okay, so I'm going to take my millimeter, for example. Okay, this millimeter is meant to pick up EMF, right? It is able to read how much is in the area. Now, it doesn't dictate whether it picks up EMF naturally. It picks it up through spirit connection, or it picks it up through, I don't know, a fault in the furnace where it's letting off too much. Okay, the bottom line is it's got an antenna and it downloads, and that's what it's supposed to be doing. Okay, it's supposed to be inputting that energy to give you a read for it. You have to think of yourself in that regard. You may not understand why you don't feel good about it, but you're still drawn to figure that out. Okay. You have to break that feeling down a little bit more. As a psychic, when I first started doing readings and doing walk-ins and stuff like that, I would be very intimidated. So I often talk about a story about a case I did where I walked into a room and all of a sudden I felt my throat slit. I was immediately upset. I was immediately angry. Like, how dare you? This is not your place. You're not welcome to get into that energy field. And I was upset. I thought, why would you do this to me? I've been respectful. I've been asking you kind
Mhm.
questions. I have not been intimidating. And then it hit me. All I heard from one of my guides was, he's trying to tell you. And so I didn't know it at the time, but he had his throat slit. He
Yeah.
actually was murdered that way. And so he wasn't trying to hurt me, but in his mind's
Thank you,
eye,
Tim.
as an entity, he couldn't speak up because his throat was slit. And so he was trying to explain to me, communicate to me that this is what was happening. Now, I didn't know how to read the energy, so it intimidated me. And to this day, there's situations where I don't know how to read the energy and it's fearful, right? Your brain takes over and it kind of goes danger. I think in a scenario like yours, Tracy, it's really important to read the energy. You may not feel good or get good vibes, but why are you not getting good vibes? It may not be about the fact that it's a bad place. It could be that something bad happened there and it wants you to find out. It wants you to kind of come in. And so it's magnetism that's bringing you in. Do some research if you can, try and narrow it down to a street, a home, a business, and go from there. And once you can narrow that part of town down, you may find that you're going to get more answers than you thought you would.
And it's kind of this thing that people don't understand why things happen to me and why do I have this activity and why do things bother me. Here's the reality of it. If spirit can sense that you can see, feel, or hear, you become a target.
Mm-hmm.
That's the reality of it. If you have that ability and they can sense who can communicate with them and who can't, I mean, there's a lot of intelligence behind that consciousness, and you know, it happens. I mean, that's why mediums, mediums, psychic mediums, I've had have them as young as 3. They don't realize why the dead are coming to them in the middle of the night, scaring the crap out of them. Coming into their bedroom at night when they're 3 years old, and all they're wanting is help. They don't realize that this 3-year-old can't help them. They can just sense that somebody in the house is able to help me because they can sense me and I can sense them.
Mm-hmm.
So there's just a lot of things going around that you have to be aware of, be cognizant of. Psychic mediums they don't start at 25 years old. I mean, Katie's been doing this all of her life. She's had issues with this stuff all of her life. Mine I ignored until I was in my teens, and then couldn't ignore it anymore because in my raising it was kind of crazy witchcraft. So, you put that aside for a minute and you kind of go, oh, okay, well, I don't want to be considered a witch, so I'm just gonna ignore it. But it's just there's 68% of the world's population has latent abilities, which means that they have no clue what they have going on. They just have it going on. So, until you learn how to wrangle it, put a title on it, and learn how to manage it, and for God's sakes, if you realize you have a gift, please don't let the first thing out of your mouth is, I want to help somebody. Please don't say that. Please say to yourself, I want to protect myself. I want to have a comfortable, safe ride in this journey. And I'm going to do that first before I try to help someone, because I'm going to tell you, giving the gift away when you're not prepared is one of the biggest mistakes you could ever make. Biggest mistake you could ever make. You got to be careful.
I don't think people realize how much energy you give. When I do readings for people, so that for those of you that don't know, that's my daytime job. I do readings. If I've done a lot of readings that day, I'm exhausted like any other job. I may be sitting here, but I'm still expelling energy and a lot more than what people realize. And so when you first start getting out, you don't know how to dial things down. You don't know how to kind of, it's like a big burst of energy. I always explain to people who are getting into their psychic abilities and their spiritual awareness. It's like, when you're watching a horse race, the big expulsion of energy is them pounding out of that gate. That's when they're getting their grips into the dirt and they're trying to gain that speed. And so the same kind of thing happens when you're starting to do this stuff, is that you're utilizing so much of that energy, you don't realize how much you still need to keep. You know, every phone, computer, anything with a CPU on it has to have data running in the background and so much memory in order to make everything operate successfully. And the same thing occurs. So if you're starting to feel really overwhelmed, and I'm not saying you have to be a conscious psychic medium, but even if you feel like you're having a haunting and you're getting all of these overwhelmed things, they've kind of plugged into you and they're uploading that energy. It's not necessarily a parasitic in nature, meaning negative, but they want you to be able to see them, so they're going to use that energy. Now, Valerie had said really quick, I saw Dean's childhood home in a dream because his dad, who passed, sorry to hear that, showed it to me. I felt out of place when I was there in the real life because there was extra walls and the couch wasn't where I expected it to be, but it still felt like home when I was there. This is the coolest part, okay? In a lot of the investigations we've conducted, a lot of places I've been to, and Richard, I'm sure you're going to agree with me. You'll see a scenario where the ghost is floating through the wall, or you'll see, it's sitting there looking like it's playing a piano, but there's no piano there, or it's floating a few feet above or below. A lot of times that's because it's picking up on the energy field that was there in the past. There may not be a doorway there now, but 300 years ago, 200 years ago, there was. And so it's still in that mind frame. Okay. So, and a lot of times in a residual haunt, that's what you're going to feel, you're going to see, is that you may notice a spirit halfway through the floor, or you may notice a spirit, walking where there used to be a door, those types of things. But something like that, he was taking you back to what he was comfortable with, and that's okay.
Yeah. Now, Tara says, is it easier for spirits to manipulate electronics, such as turning on a radio, etc., if you're a sensitive? Now, again, for me, this is another flag of caution. Because for an entity to be able to do that means you're sharing your energy. Be careful. Because you don't want to share your energy with any entity out there without your permission, without you knowing about it, because that is the fastest way to get drained, is let an entity use your energy to be able to manipulate something. And they will. If you give them an opportunity, they will, because they may not have enough energy on their own. So they will utilize yours, and sap you dry, and to be able to get their way in what they want to do and what they want to manipulate. So, again, you basically become paranormal fodder. And that's really kind of what it comes down to. And that's where you start getting paranormal hangover. You wind up going home exhausted. What happened? Well, the spirits basically chewed you up like a buffet and spit you out. That's exactly what happened. And, people laugh. But when I do investigations and tours, I'm real big about pre-medding. I will talk to people about pre-medding. You may not be big on ibuprofen, but I'm going to tell you, before I do an investigation, I take a couple. It lowers the inflammation in the body. And when you become that target for energy exhaustion or energy, be able to using up your energy, that'll keep your body from taking the aches and pains on from being sapped. So I'm telling you, pre-med, it's important. Just look at that as just kind of an idea of going forward. If you wake up with a paranormal hangover every time you do an investigation, or you go home feeling like you're absolutely exhausted and sore, pre-med.
Yeah.
Because you're being hit hard.
Absolutely. Now, Howard Petrie, again, really well-known paranormal investigator, has a bunch of podcasts. You're going to have to check him out off the Things Network. He just sent me a couple photos of himself. So what he does, his own podcast, is in front of his computer. And unfortunately, we can't share them on the show, Howard, tonight. But it's something that if you're cool with, I don't want to put you on the spot, we can certainly show it. But it's a really neat photo. I don't know, Howard, if you're comfortable putting it in the group chat. You're more than welcome to do that. We have no problems with that. But it's most definitely an entity there. And it's literally sitting there, standing, watching this gentleman. So, and he had said that basically it was captured while he was doing his podcast. Richard and I, on multiple occasions, have had EVPs come through. We've had viewers, write us back and go, did you realize at so-and-so time there was a whole sentence, or was this, or was that? It happens. It absolutely happens. So that's kind of a cool rarity that you got to capture.
Yep. One of our top fans, Stephanie, she catches them all the time with our show.
Yeah.
She'll send times over to me on Messenger, like, this time, and at 8:21 and 17 seconds it just happened, and you go back and you listen to them, you go, oh my God, that really happened. I mean, it's just when you have that kind of energy crossing over the lanes of electricity, they're going to get intertwined. They're going to happen. Sometimes they're on my end, sometimes they're on Katie's end. It happens. Most of the time they're on my end, but it's just, it happens that way.
I got a little bit of a.
What's that?
I got back up. The stuff behind me, I got back.
I got my you got a wall of steel back there.
Right. So Tracy had mentioned, she said, okay, I understand. We've been talking about dialing it down, understanding, how to read the information. She says, okay, I understand. I see murders in my dreams, vivid colors, and I can go to sleep to the bath. I could go to sleep and then go to the bathroom and go back to it. So that's really cool. That's a wonderful way to break down whether you're actually dreaming or you're actually receiving messages. Right. When it's something very, very vivid, I tell all my clients, when you're dealing with something extremely vivid, you can smell it in your dream. It's in color. It's, it's ingrained into your brain. Write it down. I don't care, or put it on, record it on your phone or whatever, because as the day goes on, you may notice that you're remembering it less and less. There's a reason for it, and you may not understand the reason at the time, but when it hits, then it's going to come back to you. So it's really important. A lot of times entities use the dream state in order to give you messages. So I just wanted to kind of get that out of the way.
Right.
Now, Adam says, can ghosts cross over at any time if they want to be here, or do they need to help cross over? Okay, so Adam, this is where it comes into. This is where there's ghosts and spirits, okay? So, ghosts. Let me put it into perspective. If I died as Katie, and I didn't choose to cross over, or I was confused at death, I would remain a ghost. I would only remember Katie's thoughts. So, my physical form is gone, but I still have Katie's personality, okay? We're really not who we are. When we die and we cross over, I'm really not Katie anymore. There's essences of Katie. There's parts of me in my mind and my body and my soul in the sense that who I was as that individual. But I'm really kind of my soul person. And so we reincarnate and come back over and over and over again. So there's little pieces of us that come with us when we go through the descension process. But that's the difference between a spirit and a ghost. I often talk about my grandfather. When he comes to visit, he shows up at 86. He doesn't show up at 20 because I wouldn't know who he is. But he's really not 86 anymore, right? He comes to know how I'm comfortable. A ghost is going to kind of, you may see them where if there was a tragic event, they're still bleeding. You may notice that there's an arm missing, or you may notice scruff on them. You may notice sometimes they can dress how they want to, and sometimes they'll manipulate the situation and they'll make you think they're a little girl when they're something else. But the bottom line is, that's not a black and white question. It's something that it's kind of circumstantial in the sense that, yes, you can cross them over if you make them aware of it. Religious people, in my experience, have had the hardest time crossing over. People who have dementia, who suffered fevers, who had brain trauma, who had really quick accidents. Those are the type of people that didn't have time for that transitional period. And so they're afraid. Within religion, and I'm not docking religion at all, I'm simply stating that there's a perception as to what happens at death. And in my experience, that's not what happens. It's not exactly what has been, described to them. And so they have this fear because it's not going down the way they thought it would, so they choose to stay. Sometimes it comes down to the fact that they have sinned, and because they have sinned, they're afraid of judgment if they cross over. So that's another kind of fear. When you're dealing with somebody who's had a tragic event, I had a case probably about 6 years ago where I predicted this young lad's death. And I ended up hearing him over the radio screaming for his mother, and I had to pull the car over and explain to him, psychically, that, honey, you're dead. Like, I put it as nice as possible, but basically, we got to get you crossed over. You're going to have a better time on the other side waiting for your mother than stuck at this intersection. And so once I allowed him to make that decision, he transferred over, and it was at that point that she contacted me and said, I'm finally seeing the spirit of my son. It's been months. I haven't been able to see him. Well, he was connected through that tragic event to that specific location. So it's freeing because they're able to come and go. They don't have to be them anymore, but you're still going to see them as you would know them.
And John kind of ties in this point a little bit. He said, is it possible that the ghosts themselves, who don't realize they're dead, sometimes thinks that they are alive and that we are the actual ghosts? He said, I hope that makes sense. And honestly, it does. We don't really know precisely how they see us. I think that is actually the hardest thing I've ever had to do, and I've had to do it multiple times, is announce to a person who's dead, you're dead. That is probably one of the hardest things I've ever had to do as a paranormal investigator. They're not prepared for it. There are things that go along with that are just, you're basically performing a eulogy for them, just to get them to go home.
Absolutely.
And it's sad. It's really, really sad. They don't realize they're dead, probably because, as Katie spoke about earlier, there was a sudden death. They didn't have time to transition over. That's one of the things about being a person on hospice. You're preparing yourself. You're getting yourself prepared to transition over. And thankfully, most oftentimes that I have seen and known about, that there is another person that comes forward to transition you over. So you have a person there because you're prepared to go. They know you're prepared to go. So you have that person there to help you go home. So it's not as scary and it's not as frightening as, you think you're in a building and who is this person standing in front of me? And oh, by the way, they're telling you you're dead.
Yeah.
I've gotten EVPs. I got an EVP from a lady that shook me to my core. Literally, I was asking EVP questions in the building and I'm dead? That's rough, man. I don't care who you are. That's rough to hear. I mean, this is a woman that thought she was still running the earth. Yeah, now I got to explain to her, you're gone. You moved on. You got to move on to the light. You got to, that's not an easy conversation to have.
No.
So a lot of people think all this is this is great. We're going to get out here and we're going to get doors slammed in our face. And you got to remember and not forget, you're dealing with what used to be a human soul, a human life, a personality, a grandmother, grandfather, father, mother, sister, brother. You're dealing with that. You got to go at that with kid gloves sometimes, you really do. So, those kind of things bug me a bit to a point, but those are the hardest cases that are dealing with people who don't know they're dead.
Yeah, I want to touch base a little bit too. So two things. Number one, John, you had asked about what they are to you. In my experience, when I've communicated with people who've passed over, a lot of times they describe us as light. They see us as an energy source, not necessarily a physical being. Okay, the physical side of it's not necessarily there. That's what spirits have talked to me about. As far as them thinking we're the ghosts, I've never kind of had dialogue in that regard. Sometimes they're intimidated. They don't know what we are. So that kind of answers that question. So death. Let's talk about death a little bit so that people understand types of haunts. So when it's been a tragic event or when, it's been a very quick death, again, Richard had mentioned that it's confusing, it's scary, they don't know what's to be expected, and therefore they may choose not to cross over. That doesn't mean they're not alone. In my experience, you never die alone. Somebody is always there. People ask me all the time, did my child suffer? Did they suffer? Was it painful? Did they suffer? Most of the time, I'm not going to say every case, but most of the time that they are removed from that body before they feel physical pain. They're not meant to feel that pain. Okay. They're meant to be transitioning over. So that feeling of pain, fear, that is kind of, there's a warm blanket wrapped around them. So I try to tell those clients, those parents, don't worry about those things. And it goes the same with animals. Pets are very similar. People go, well, was my dog in pain? When I had to euthanize him, did I do the right thing? 9 times out of 10, the animal has let you know probably 2 weeks before the transition had to take place that it was ready to go. Okay. So in those types of scenarios, people come for animals too. Spirits come for animals too. Your animals are not alone, and they too have a choice whether they want to come and go.
Right.
Going to the types of death that occur. So we talked about tragic and confusing events, but I'm sure we all have heard the scenarios in old age homes or residential homes for the elderly where somebody who has dementia, Alzheimer's, who's not cognizant of what's going on, are talking about visitation. It could even be somebody who is in a hospice, it doesn't have to be old, but somebody who's at the end of life, they're at the end of care life, and they're talking about visiting. My aunt came and visited, only the aunt's been dead for 40 years. That is not a coincidence, nor is it a misinterpretation. They're preparing for that transitional period to make it as smooth as possible. The last thing the other side wants is for you to experience pain when you're transitioning. So even though sometimes death occurs quickly, they're trying as much as they can to help that transitional period. Dying of old age is different than dying in a tragic event. Okay, an accident is an accident is an accident. Sometimes accidents occur, but for the most part, it's kind of written in your timeline, and that's a whole nother subject we can get into at some point. But really, it's all about how smooth you can transition over. They don't want to leave. They don't want to leave people here. That's when you transition. That's not part of our life. The objective is not to stay and haunt your home. The objective is to go through an ascension process and go through that growth period and to reflect on your life to know that you're doing the right things in spiritual growth. So they're trying at their best to make things go smooth.
Well, and it's people have had that for years. Again, when you go into people with Alzheimer's, for example, my mother, personal story from it, my mom, who I believe I got my abilities from, when she was suffering with Alzheimer's, when it first started, she was getting visitations a lot. Now, I think the first thing that people get into consideration there is, are they really having visitations, or is it their mind working overtime to do so? And with my mother, it was true visitations, because I would question her about what she is seeing. And the amount of detail, things like that she would give of who she was talking to, that kind of stuff right there is amazing, and you really can't refute it. I mean, the mind would have to work double time. When the mind's already damaged because of Alzheimer's, they're not going to want to have the ability to go through detail after detail after detail. That's what the problem is. But she was getting visitations, whereas before, she would never make mention of paranormal activity. It's kind of one of those things where it was taboo back in those days to be somebody who had any kind of abilities. But I'm a big firm believer that when you have a challenge mentally, such as Alzheimer's, for example, I think you're more susceptible to visitation. Because I believe, personally, and I'm using this from experience with my mom, I think your mind is not as blocked.
Mm-hmm.
I think your mind is more prepared.
Side of your mind. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're not blocked on the everyday like the rest of us are. You're not in the everyday like the rest of us are. And your mind is more free than it is with the regular person. So I believe, just as I do with many other cases of people who have challenges, for example, I believe people who suffer from autism have more experience with the paranormal than the average person. I won't use the word normal because that's not true. There's no such thing as normal, but in my book. But I think people that suffer from things like that, Down syndrome, I think a lot of those things have a lot to do with visitations and paranormal activity sensitivity. Again, because they lose that block, where we all block as many things as we can in our daily. A lot of those folks can't. Yep. And a lot of those folks got too many other things going on in their brain besides worrying about blocking something that's coming to visit them. So I'm kind of of the belief, and I want your take on it, Katie. I really do. I want your take on that, because I think people that operate with challenges in that regard, mentally or whatever, I think they're more susceptible.
Agreed. So, and I'm sure we talked about this before, but I'll bring it up again for those of you who are just tuning in. what we don't realize is that our brain and our spiritual consciousness are two separate things, and our brain is responsible for keeping us alive. Our brain says, don't go there, you could get hurt, eat that, that's healthy. Our spiritual consciousness is that gut feeling, and I always tell people, listen to your gut, but it's that gut feeling that says do this or don't do this, or go here or don't go there. Children, elderly, developmentally delayed, those types of people, they don't have the same cognizance. They don't have their brain saying, don't do this. There's an innocence about them. And because of that innocence and lack of judgment, that's when that can kind of amp up. I mean, there's people with physical disabilities, and I don't even like to call them a disability because to me, it's just a different way of getting information, but somebody who's blind or somebody who can't hear or, those types of things. Lots of times in scenarios, other things are heightened because that is, I don't want to even say delayed, but that's not working or functioning properly. The same type of thing occurs with energy. So, there's certain individuals that are developmentally delayed, but amazing artists or have amazing voices, or, even people at the end of stages of life with Alzheimer's or dementia, they're still very capable of doing certain things. I mean, Grandpa, who couldn't get off the couch, managed to steal the keys, take the car, drive 5 kilometers, get himself lost, but he was able to do it without judgment. That is where the energy comes in. So I agree 100%. I think that it just depends on the situation, and it depends on how the individual is able to decipher what's going on. They may not know it's a ghost, but they're still witnessing it.
Yeah, I think it's a matter of processing. I really do. I think it's a matter of processing. Tamara said, yes, my son has autism between the ages of 3 and 5. He would point out aunts, cousins, and grandma who all passed away before he was born. It kind of goes back to even average children. Okay. The reason why children are more susceptible, period, to paranormal activity is because they don't have a disbelief system.
Right.
Adults have a disbelief. Logic. Mm-hmm. No. Yeah. Logic is sometimes your brain just doesn't want to recognize that, yes, that door just closed on its own. No, it's not because the foundations is faltering. No, it's not because it is because something shut the door. Hello. It's hard to.
In my case, my brain doesn't want to register. I ate the whole bag of chips.
Yeah, right. I mean, for some people, and that's really a good point. There are people out there that say, "Oh no, I never see anything. I never hear anything. I never see anything. I never hear anything." Maybe it's because your brain doesn't want you to.
Right. The fear.
That's legit. Your brain is your biggest advocate, okay, or your worst enemy. I mean, that's just the reality of it. But it is your biggest advocate for self-protection, to be able to defend yourself against things that it doesn't believe you're prepared for. Exactly. And sometimes that might mean paranormal activity. If your brain does not think you're able to handle it, it's not going to allow you to see it. That's legit. It's not going to allow you to see it. Because it doesn't want to go there.
Glasses, right? And it goes in life too. There's red flags in people that you refuse to see. And it's the same type of thing. That's why, going back to the dream state, as somebody had mentioned earlier, that cognizant judgment is not there. It's not, it's your mind is open to receiving information. So it's on a download. And, I think that if anybody feels that they aren't having the sensitivity they should, it's really time to kind of sit down, ground yourself, do a meditation, and just allow the information to come in. Now, that doesn't mean any information. There should be intent in the information you want to receive. But if you're afraid to see a spirit, if you know it's Uncle Jack and he passed away and he's just trying to make himself known, then ask him not to let you see him. Say, can you whisper in my ear? Or can you leave me a present? Can you leave me something? Put something that I'm not going to question. There's other ways that they can communicate with you that doesn't necessarily have to be they're jumping out and spooking at you. That they're just letting you know they're there. So I think as humans, our brain goes to that conclusion. Don't do that. It's bad. We don't kind of break it down and wonder why it makes us feel the way we do. I think a lot of psychics are people that I think are very in-depth people. I've never met a person, and I've never met another sensitive or psychic that was not an in-depth thinker. Okay. And I don't mean overthinking. I mean that they are almost like little detectives. They're willing to kind of put the effort in to find out why they're feeling that way, or why it's happening, or even to a point where they're debunking. Earlier in the show, we had talked about, a location where it's important to do your homework as an investigator to find out what happened. The same thing takes place with a psychic. When I receive a piece of information or a download, it's not my job to judge the information, but it's my job to take all of the information down. I do not dismiss what I've been given, because absolutely everything means something. It may not be in order, it may not make sense to you now, but it's there for a reason. So these in-depth thinkers can kind of process that without judging it, and that's when they get their download.
No, truth. And the one thing that Katie's pointed out, because her and I have done some readings together for folks that have won readings on here and stuff. And the one point that she dramatically makes every time she does a reading is when she gives you information, okay, it may not mean right this second. It may mean 2 months from now. It may mean a week from now. It may mean tomorrow. But it's going to happen. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen. You have to remember, and not to get preachy in any way, time is of our convenience. Time was set up for our convenience. Time has nothing to do with the other side at all. Time has nothing to do in God's world, if you believe in God. Time has nothing to do with his world either. Okay, we have that for our convenience, so we don't lose our minds about what's this and what. Time was set up for us. So, thinking that, it's been 2 weeks and Katie didn't say anything, that what she said didn't come true. You know how many times I've talked to Katie, for example, and she'll tell me about a case that she's talked to somebody, a reading that she's done, and the person will follow up with her and say, oh, by the way, what you told me 3 months ago was going to happen. It's the truth. I've done the same thing with people in my cases of readings too. It may not happen right now, but it's going to. It's destined to. The only way you can change that is if you change the energy. If you change the energy, it might not happen.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't, it's liable to happen like it's supposed to.
Absolutely. I always say, please absorb the information I give you. Don't judge it right away. And then I say that the future is fluid, and I have a motto. So I always tell people, the only reason why I'm seeing it is so you can change it. If it was supposed to happen, why would I see it? So I look at it in those perspectives. I've not always been able to save the day. I had told a gentleman 3 years ago that he needed to sell his motorcycle. I said, there's going to be an accident. It's not a good scenario. And unfortunately, he was killed on the highway later that year. Can I prevent all of it? Absolutely not. But there's a bigger lesson learned in that. And even in my opinion, he didn't die in vain, nor does he haunt that location. But his family has to go through a healing and grieving process, as well as a spiritual growth through this stuff. So there is planning that goes on the other side that happens here, but there are some things that we are able to transition. And as Richard said, change that energy. The same thing goes back to a haunting, and what we kind of started with our conversation. If you feel that you are being haunted, you have every right to close that door. It may be as simple as you saying, look, I know you're there. I see you. I feel you. I'm not appreciative. This is my space, and I'm going to ask you to step out of my space. You're not meant to be here. Do you need to move on, or can I take you home? Like, where do you need to be? And if they want to open communication, they may say, I just like your energy. I just like what you're about. You're a beautiful light source, and I just wanted to say hello. Or maybe you remind them of a loved one. Or maybe they feel that you can see them, and so they want to have that communication. There's many different forms. Parasitic energy is not going to come up in front of you and talk to you. It's not going to go, ooh, I'm here. It's parasitic. It's something that latches on without you knowing. It drains your battery. It drains your spirit. It drains your soul. And so it operates a little differently. So if you have an entity coming up to you and wanting that communication, most of the time you can cast them off politely.
Yeah, politely. I mean, sometimes it's a matter of, look, I don't want to hear from you. I don't want to see you. And it's a monologue. I've heard people in here, I think in chat earlier, somebody had mentioned something about, when I come home, I tell them hello. Okay, that's not bad. But don't go into your house asking questions, looking for answers. No, bad idea.
I often ask, did one of you vacuum? Could you put a dust
right? Could you go ahead and can you go ahead and just do some dishes or something? I mean, come on. Sherry said Richard told me over the phone what a section of my backyard looked like. Yeah, actually, that's funny. I remember that reading. That was actually remote viewing, and we talked about that last week. We had an entire show on remote viewing and versus astral projection, for example. And that was me doing remote viewing for you. That's how I was able to do it, and that was what I call a confirmation note for me to be able to say to you, "Hey, I'm not a fraud because I can tell you what's going on in your backyard, and I don't even know where you live."
Right.
So that happens a lot. Now, Tara says, "What does imprinting on you mean? Like smelling perfume suddenly when you're outside alone?"
Okay, so imprinting is the act of kind of connecting energy. Okay, so there's sensing energy and then there's connecting with it. And I know that's kind of convoluted, but sensing energy is like you're witnessing an entity. Okay. And then imprinting means that not only have you witnessed the entity, but he's imprinted his pain. So say he got shot in the stomach and he's giving you that pain on an empathic basis. It could mean that they've imprinted that scent and it stays with you for a few days. It
Thank you,
just wasn't
John.
a print, you smelt the cigarettes in the room that had smokers in it, a cigar room, you smelt it and you left. They've imprinted it on you and it's still affecting you. When I don't know, you go to an Italian restaurant, it's got the best food, you come out, you can smell like you smell like you're still in the restaurant. It's the same type of principle. Even though you're not eating the food, it's imprinted on you. There's scent on you, if that makes sense. So it's kind of the transfer of energy, and that's a basic breakdown I can give you.
Yeah, I mean that's really what it comes down to. Imprinting is exactly what it means. Like for example, here is a wholesome ideal of what imprinting means. You ever come across a baby duck and it follows you? That's because it imprinted on you and you imprinted on it. It thinks
So
you're its
that's one of my
mother.
pets. It
Yeah,
just felt
it
it
thinks
just
you're
came
its
home.
mother, and you just realize you just picked up a second child or a third child. But it's really just again, it's an energy transfer. It's an imprint of an energy transfer. Um, yeah, it is. Gosh, how do I? It's
Well,
easy to get.
Sherry had mentioned great example. Sherry said, "I know my stepdad is here when I smell cigarette smoke."
There you
Exactly.
go.
Not only are you picking up, that residual smell, but he's imprinting that to you to identify that in fact is him because you know him by that scent.
Right.
You know, it's that imprint of energy.
No, exactly. And that's it. I mean, that's again, those are what I call confirmation notes. Those are just them saying, "Hey, it is me. Don't be frightened or don't be alarmed or whatever." Because again, the unknown is more frightening than finding out down the road that it might be your dad or your grandma or whatever. So it's always best to have a good idea of who you're dealing with. And again, that goes back to the original point of get a team that has a good relationship with the psychic medium or has one,
Mhm.
on their arsenal. And as I am saying, that is an arsenal because you go into the paranormal, you need to be loaded for bear. And that's just really what it comes down to. But, a lot of teams are involving a lot of people who have abilities now. And I think it's outstanding. I think it brings a different level to the table. I think it brings a better understanding of what's going on in a place or a space itself.
Mhm.
I mean, yeah, do they have to be somebody who's valid? Of course they do. Yeah, and I would test them. To be quite frank, I've been tested a million times by people because there's a lot of people out there running around saying they're psychic mediums or whatever, and they're not. So yeah, be sure who you're dealing with on that. And I mean, I've been tested by several city council members and things like that. Oh, our building's not haunted. How would you know our building is haunted? And all this other stuff. And who's buried over here then? And I have to do a reading on the property to be able to prove to them. Oh, by the way, there's a dog and two human beings buried on the property. Oh, okay. Well, I guess you're legit. Well, how would I have known that?
Right. Now, Chris
So
says, I did it. Yeah, just quickly, because we're getting to the end of our episode, guys.
yeah,
I
we
did a
are.
preliminary audio recording at a house on an audio, and audio picked up the sounds of hangers and a metal coat hanging rod in a closet. Very distinct sound. The owner declined to do a full investigation a couple months after her granddaughter hung herself in the closet. I wondered if the sounds were the warning. It absolutely could be. It absolutely could be. That's that fear. So when she even though unfortunately a lot of times they're ready to go, right? That there's a euphoric feeling that happens when they feel like they're at the end of their pain, and because of that, that imprint or that expulsion of energy could have caused it, or the fear that she was feeling at the time. But that absolutely that makes sense for sure. Now, Carolyn says, also, every time my daughter or I see a 555, we know Mom and Granny is here. So that's wonderful. Numbers, letters, patterns, those types of things. I often refer to that as the red car effect. So I always tell people, think you the make, the model, and serial number. Think of your car. It doesn't have to be exactly that car, but before you purchase that vehicle, how many of those vehicles did you notice? You didn't. But after you purchased them, you're aware of them, and it's not like you're out looking for those vehicles, but you're consciously aware, and that's what's happening. It's really important when you're seeing those numbers that you really go deeper, and what are you thinking about when you see those numbers, because a lot of times it's affirmations and validations.
No, absolutely, you're right. And we are almost at the end of the show. Holy mackerel.
I know. Time flies when you're having fun, everybody.
Guys, we really hope you guys get something out of this. There's a lot of different things we could talk about this for days. Different days and days and days. And I think it's important that you get the basics out of the way. I think it's important that everyone learns how to be careful around paranormal activity and hauntings. And I think we've covered all those bases. I am usually the Papa Bear who will talk about how to protect yourself more than anything else. I'm just, I'm afraid of people getting into something that may make it a problem. So, Carlotta, you're welcome. Thank you very much. Stephanie, thank you very much.
Always a pleasure, guys. Always a pleasure. We thank you so much for joining us.
Carolyn, thank you.
If you have a subject matter, something you'd like to talk about, if you can put it in the comments, you can private message us. Howard, we'd like to touch base a little bit more. I'd love to see those photos. We'll put them up on the screen. Have you guys had a paranormal event? Have you captured an entity on camera? You know what? Richard and I have no problems putting it up on the screen and talking about it. If you have questions about it, or you want us to get our 2 cents on it, we'll definitely do that. Just let us know. The reason why we do this show is for you guys. We want to help you as much as possible and make you feel comfortable and educated. And if we don't know the answer, we're going to do our best to try and find it for you.
Yeah, absolutely, guys. I mean, this show, as we've said multiple times, this show was designed for you. Our job here is to bring you an example of information, and bring you examples of how to do things better, correctly, whatever, before you go into the field and try to do them yourself. Answer your questions, bring you the education we feel is necessary for you to have. Now, Chris said, I'd love to hear more about remote viewing on my page, on the Let's Talk About It Facebook page, on the Parallax Network page on Facebook, on the Things Network on Facebook. All of our shows are on there from last week previously. On my page personally, every show is on there from weeks backward. Yeah.
Now, John Butler had said, and thank you, Katie, for doing our show. So I didn't want to let the cat out of the bag, but there's a local television show called The John and Dave Show. And they are with the local Ottawa Valley, your network, your TV network. And I was delighted to be a guest on their show. So that should be coming up on an upcoming episode. I'm not sure of the date yet. John, if you have the date, you're welcome to put it in. If you want to put the link. Otherwise, tune in, because it's a really great local show. It's worldwide, guys. You can get it online, Facebook, Your TV, Ottawa Valley, and the Dave and John Show.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah.
Guys, I think we're going to pull the plug on this show. I think it was a great show. And again, as Katie said before, if you have a subject topic or something that you want us to talk about, let us know. We do have the Let's Talk About It Facebook page. You can go drop it there, or you can drop it to us personally, individually, whatever. We'd like to have it. We have covered a few topics over the last going on 2 years now. So we may have covered it, but if it's been long enough now, well, we think it would be something to bring back up again, we will.
Or if we learn more about the subject.
Yeah, we're going to bring up more about the subject. So we won't know unless you bring it to us. Just saying. You'll be seeing Katie with one of these.
I can't wait. Guys, thank you so much for all of you guys tuning in. It means so much to us. My heart is full. Thank you so much for taking the time. It means a lot. You've devoted 90 minutes with us, and we appreciate it. So thank you.
Well, guys, you go ahead and take care of yourselves. we are going ahead and calling it a week. Guys, have a great Monday as well, please. And we will see you guys next week. See ya.
Bye.